Welcome to Canada's Entrepreneur, where we talk to the entrepreneurs who are making it happen across Canada and deliver the news, trends, knowledge, and opinions from entrepreneurs and business influencers across the country. Hi, everyone. I'm Phil Bliss, founder and CEO of Canada's Entrepreneur, and coming to you today from Toronto. Today, we're going to meet Shaun Stratton. Shaun has spent his career becoming an expedition leader, international leadership consultant, professional speaker, and best-selling author. He is the founder of the International Vegan Film Festival and World Tour, where they inspire, educate, and entertain audiences with vegan-themed films worldwide. Today, we're going to meet Shaun in his current role as a business optimization specialist and franchise owner at Schoolie Mitchell. He's combining his prior entrepreneurship, leadership development, strategic sales knowledge, and consulting experience into a role where he's able to directly impact a business's bottom line. Shaun believes every business should pay the right rates, receive the right services, and have the peace of mind knowing their business is running as efficiently as possible. Shaun, welcome to Canada's Entrepreneur.
Thank you.
Before we get deeper into the conversation, let's find out a bit more about you and your entrepreneurial journey to date. 4 or 5 minute summary, just so everybody knows who Shaun is, basically.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate being here. It's a pleasure and it's an honor. My entrepreneurial journey, it has many curves and bumps along the way, as any entrepreneur at 50 years old would would have had. I feel like I've always had kind of that entrepreneurial spirit in me since childhood. I was a big fundraiser for all my sports teams in high school. I was always the top fundraiser and kind of saw it as a challenge and enjoyed it. And every neighbor in our neighborhood knew Shaun because I'm knocking on their door every spring or fall, selling something or else, trying to fundraise money. And that stuff came easily and I enjoyed it. And when most of my friends just dreaded going out to sell anything for their sports teams and hoping their parents were going to pony up for the cost of the next travel, I kind of took it on. And so I didn't really know what it was at the time, but looking back, it definitely was that entrepreneurial spirit. And I kind of moved away a little bit from the entrepreneurial spirit after university. During university, I learned about kind of a career in outdoor education, and I didn't know what outdoor education was. Didn't know it existed. And it's basically leading expeditions around the world, helping people with personal growth and development, leadership training, outdoor skills training. And once I learned that there was a career in this, I jumped on that, and that was another passion of mine. Is just kind of outdoor travel, adventure travel has always been a passion. And so I ended up spending the next 15 years leading wilderness expeditions around the world focused on personal growth and development, leadership with Outward Bound and the National Outdoor Leadership School mostly. And I even see it as an entrepreneurial because when you're on an expedition, and most of my expeditions were 20 days to up to 60 to 80 days. And so these are long expeditions with mostly US college students. And when you're out there on an expedition, it's your expedition to run as you want. And we have a pickup point and a drop off point, or a drop off and a pickup point, and basically we run it as we are. And so it's a bit entrepreneurial in there in terms of planning and running a show. Yeah, and then after I kind of knew eventually I would, get burnt out of that industry and want to settle down a bit. For 9 years, I didn't live in one place for more than 3 months and traveled to every continent in the world leading expeditions for many, many years. And so over 2,000 nights of expeditions I've led. And eventually in my early 30s, I got burnt out and I knew I was always going to start something. And I started a few kind of false starts of, I wanted to do an adventure travel company for high school students, but really quickly I realized why am I starting this? I'm already burnt out of this industry. Why am I starting another one? And gradually I got into more leadership consulting and professional speaking. I went to a CAPS conference. It's a Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. Shortly after I was moving out of the industry, out of the outdoor education industry. And I thought, wow, I enjoy presenting. It doesn't bother me. I've been teaching and presenting for a long time, and I've got a lot of decent stories from my expeditions that I can put, a leadership stent on it. And so I started doing professional speaking. At the time, I did a master's in leadership from Royal Roads University in Victoria. Uh, I wrote a book called Teams on the Edge, sharing lessons, leadership lessons from my expeditions. And then I did a TED talk. And so I was doing this for several years, doing leadership consulting, really enjoyed it. It is, consulting as nature, as natural as it goes. It is sporadic, and at the time, I was based in Vancouver. I moved back to Newfoundland, where I grew up in St. John's, and met my wife. And shortly after that, my wife's career kind of started moving us around. She's in medicine and was still in training, and so my leadership consulting had to take a bit of a back seat, managing the travel, moving around, started having children. And eventually, we ended up in Ottawa with three kids, and my wife started her career here, kind of as a staff physician at the Civic Hospital in Ottawa. And uh, at that time, we were pretty overwhelmed with three kids and no family around, and we decided that I would stay at home, and I would put my consulting business on hold, and for the next couple of years, and stay at home and help manage the kids. And I had the privilege of being an at-home dad, and that carried on for about 6 or 7 years. Um, and I always had other things going on. I could never just be an at-home dad. I had to have my brain going elsewhere. Actually, 3 weeks into being an at-home dad, I started an international film festival, which I had no experience with, but I always needed an extra project, something to strive for. Uh, and so I was right. I've been running that film festival now for 8 or 9 years, and I also been doing some different side hustles, things like that. In the last couple of years, I was doing some B2B sales for an event management company that I was passionate about, and that brought me to about a year and a half ago when we decided that, yeah, I think we've got some time. The kids are a bit older, that we get back in the workforce, and maybe look at buying a business. So that brings us up to kind of the discovering Scully Mitchell.
Yeah, that's a nice background, really interesting. I don't know whether I could have kept up the 3 months in one spot instead. Anyway, whatever. But
It was in my 20s.
yeah, let's ask some sort of serious questions. Like, you know, you're now with Schoolie Mitchell. Why buy a franchise? I mean, you are an entrepreneur. Why buy a franchise instead of building another business from scratch?
Yeah, it's a great question, and every question, every franchise owner has that question going through their mind. And as I looked into several businesses to buy, I looked at, I was looking at buying a business. That's kind of three questions, like start from scratch, buy a business, or buy a franchise. And those are three things I was going with. Starting a business at 50, I'd started several businesses, and I wasn't really interested in the kind of the 10 years it can often take to really see the
Yeah,
success you want from a new business from scratch. And just over the years, realizing that is actually what it takes. Because when I was younger, I didn't believe that it took that long.
it does.
And I, didn't have the anything, a burning desire or something. If you're going to start from scratch, you got to have a burning desire to make this thing and bring it into the world. And I didn't have that at the moment. And that's something that I wanted to labor on for the next 10 years. And so that moved me away from kind of starting something from scratch like I had done before. And then whether it was a franchise or not, I was looking at both different options. I worked with some business brokers on several different businesses that were for sale. And then I ended up working with a franchise consultant. And the things I like about a franchise versus buying an existing business is that it's generally a proven success story. There's people that have been very successful with the business model, and that's how it exists. I like Scully Mitchell because it's been around for over 30 years, and so it has that history. There's a lot of new franchises I find in the last 3 or 4 years that don't really have a long history, and that kind of makes you a little skeptical. A little cautious. And so I like that. I like the infrastructure it comes with. So, people ask me if I have a team, I have a staff, and I was like, no, I don't have a team. Well, I kind of do have a team. I have a team of 170 employees at our head office that are there to support me in my business. Of course, they're supporting other franchises as well, but having that back end support instead of as a buying a business, you've got to manage all that yourself.
Hmm.
And so the business model is fairly simple. I'm a very busy guy in everything else in my life, whether it's family or activities or other volunteer stuff or personal hobbies. And so, uh, yeah, those are some of the reasons why I decided to go the franchise route.
So what's your role there? What do you do as a franchise owner? What do you do exactly?
Yeah, and that's a big question, obviously, and it can't really answer it as a franchise owner. I can answer it as a Scully Mitchell franchise owner,
Mhm.
because every franchise owner role is a bit different, and Scully Mitchell franchise owners are even more different than I would say the typical franchise because we're run more like a consulting company, almost more of like an accounting firm than we are of a typical franchise that would have a brick and mortar, whether it's a food franchise or elsewhere. Uh, we're generally, owner operator, home office. Usually, the employees just ourselves. Sometimes we bring on subcontractors to work with us, and so it's the roles and responsibilities are different than if you had a brick and mortar with a bunch of employees, a bunch of operating staff, maybe a manager, a bunch of equipment, facilities. All those things that a lot of other franchises have. We don't have any of that stuff, which is makes us a lot more kind of nimble and light and kind of quick to start and cheaper to start, frankly.
Mhm. So, as a bit of a newbie, I mean, you haven't been there that long. Um, how are you finding the business? I mean, how are you finding, business optimization and the story, if you like?
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoy it. I think some of it is personality related, some of it's experience related. I like how you brought up the story because, yeah, it is really all about the story in terms of attracting clients. No one wants to be sold to, but everybody loves a good story. And if you can, parlay the benefits of your business into good stories, it's really helpful for sure. In the first year of any franchise, I think in the first 2 years of any franchise, and perhaps even the first 5 years, but definitely the first two, the first year is survival, and the first two are, I think, are coming out of that, and then you get rolling. It's from what I've been experiencing, and from what I hear from senior franchisees. And overall, I really enjoy it. Just personally, I really enjoy the work. It's a good news topic to talk about. It's a cost reduction. It's about saving money. I'm not selling a widget that I'm not interested in. I'm not selling junk food that is not contributing to the society as a whole. I'm not selling, yeah, things that aren't that I don't find beneficial and that I don't believe in. And so it's nice that it is a good news topic, and that I believe in what we are selling, and the service we're providing is critical. I think for businesses and nonprofits and government organizations. That's the thing. We cover the whole gamut.
Well, so what's best about being an entrepreneur? Forget the franchise thing. You're an entrepreneur versus being an employee. Why didn't you go back and get a job, kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. It's for me, I've had a varied background. I have had some corporate jobs, which I didn't touch on in my whole summary, but for as a business owner, you have a lot of control. Um, you control your destiny. Your destiny is in your hands. There's no limit on what compensation you can make over the years. There's doesn't have the security, obviously, of being an employee, but a lot of times I think entrepreneurs are people that are really creative, are really ambitious, and um, and those two things sometimes it can be challenging in a corporate environment, when you're maybe pigeonholed in a position, and people just do your job. And a lot of corporate environments don't have that infrastructure to be entrepreneurial. Some do, within a scope to be entrepreneurial, but I really like those things about controlling your own destiny and managing your own schedule. And I don't have to miss any of my kids' activities. I can take an hour off and go to the track meet and watch my kid, and I don't have to answer to anybody. I can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and do a ton of work, because that's when I'm sharpest and brightest, and I don't have to be on the clock from 9 to 5 at a desk where when someone needs to be able to see that I'm there. And so those things really really appeal to me as an entrepreneur.
You know, I'm interested in that. You know, what what do you see the sort of the customer today? I mean, with tariffs, with discussions about recession, this, that, and what's the compelling need that you're finding with most, mainly medium-sized businesses, I would think, talking to.
Yeah, there's definitely a very volatile economic situation that we are in now, and it seems like we're always in a volatile economic situation for a myriad of reasons. But the current, reasons of the day are obviously the tariffs and some of the U.S. administration and the challenges that has on Canadian businesses and on U.S. businesses, and we work with Canadian and U.S. businesses all over both
Right.
countries. I have clients in Los Angeles, I have clients in Ottawa, I have clients in Calgary, so all over the place. Uh, it's I think a lot of the cost reduction areas that we work with are mainly operating areas. And I don't think a lot changes in terms of what we can offer and why we can offer it now better than 2 years ago or 4 years ago. At the end of the day, people still have these operating costs, whether it's telecom, whether it's waste removal, whether it's shipping costs, things like those. Those costs aren't going to change if that's the type of business you have. What's changing is people are even busier and busier, and they don't have time to review these costs because they're not usually the most expensive costs in their organization. A lot of times staffing or equipment, leasing, insurance, those are some of the higher end costs and that may come on their radar, but our costs are significant, but not the most significant. So because they're not the most, a lot of times they fly under the radar. And the majority of businesses are frankly way overpaying for these operating costs that we cover. And they're overpaying for many reasons, not because they're poor business people, but they're swamped, they're overwhelmed. They might have 20 different operating costs, and they don't have a chance or time every year to go through those 20 operating costs and to find out if they have the best market price for their costs. And they just put a blind eye to it, frankly. A lot of times they just like, okay, I know I'm overpaying for that telecom. I know I'm overpaying for that waste, but I don't have time. I've got the next sale. I got to move forward. And they don't have the time, or they don't have anybody in the organization that has the time. I spoke to one lawyer recently, and he's like, yeah, we've been trying to review our telecom for the last 2 years. It's an archaic system we have, and it's been on the list for my assistant for 2 years. So it's a classic example. I'm like, well, what's going to make her get to it this year? It's like, bring us in and we can take care of that in, 6 weeks, and it'll be off your list for the foreseeable future. And we'll get it all set up for you. That's a situation.
Okay, let's go back to your story. Okay, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, 25-year-old Shaun was living in a truck, driving up and down the west coast of the United States and Canada. At that time, I drove 3 times from Mexico to Alaska, leading expeditions. And frankly, I've been really fortunate in my childhood and my adult life to really love what I was doing at the time. I've been fortunate not to be pigeonholed in situations that I were not happy with and got stuck in them. And at the time, I was living life. I was getting paid to travel the world to the most incredible places. Um, I would maybe say enjoy it, soak it in a bit more. Really, and also, it's going to work out. It's going to work out. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
because you could never
well,
predict.
you've run a few things yourself. What advice would you give an entrepreneur that's, looking to break away from a job or whatever,
Mhm.
looking to start,
Yeah.
looking to start a business? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, and everybody's in a different situation, whether it's a dual income home, whether you have kids or dependents or not, things like that. Everything is situational. Generally, I would tell people to make sure you have enough runway in terms of savings in the bank to, cover all your living costs for at least 2 years. Uh, because I think the number one thing that stops franchises and generally a lot of businesses fall because they're undercapitalized, and people underestimate the amount of capital it's going to take before they can, you know, come over the hump and start paying themselves. And so a lot of times I'll say, yeah, keep your day job as long as you can, and perhaps even until you are making as much in your side hustle or on your franchise or as your other business. Um, until you're making as much from your business as you are from your day job, say your corporate job, to
Mhm.
switch. Uh, it's a chicken and egg thing. It's like, well, I can't. I need my more time to get my business to that level. But the big thing is undercapitalizing, and once you have dependents, and if you're the main income winner or earner from your family, then like that's a lot of pressure that goes on. And there's a saying, people say you can't save your way to success in business. um, and once you start pinching the pennies, yeah, things get in trouble.
It's good stuff. What's the best, thinking about mentorship, what's the best piece of advice that you've received that you carry along with you?
Yeah, there's so many things. I love a quote that says, "Love what you do, and you'll never work a day in your life." And I think that relates a lot to my career and my working life, which that's a very fortunate position to be in. But I've also helped create that position. I certainly wasn't given any positions I've ever had as an adult through family or connections, and that I've earned them all. But um, I think it's a balance between your skill and your passion. And I think in terms of, you know, coming up with income sources, I think following your skills is probably better than following your passion. One kind of quote I liked about, it's not about working in your passion, it's about working for something that will allow you to achieve your passion. And so some people are in jobs that they have really good skills at, or own businesses that they're really skilled at, and that job might not be their passion, but it allows for them to have the time and money to do what they're passionate about. If your passion is fly fishing, and you're really good at whatever, you own a store and you're really good at selling things, it's like that's great, you own that store, but that's creating your time to go the passion. So I don't think you necessarily always have to work in your passion, as long as you know what it is and you're creating something that gives you time to do that.
Let's have some fun just toward as we reach the end here. Um, are you a morning or a night person?
Morning, definitely, 100%.
Okay. What book are you currently reading or podcast are you listening to that you would recommend to you don't have to be reading it on the book side, that you'd recommend to the audience?
Yeah, I've just recently finished The Gap and the Gain by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Gap and the Gain is came out a couple years ago, I believe, and that's a really fun book. It talks a lot about not necessarily always striving forward and looking forward. It's recognizing how far you've come on your journey, and appreciating that, and recognizing that, and celebrating that. So many times we get depressed because we're not where we want to be right now. And the gap and the gain is, if you look at the gap where you've actually come from, whether it was 1 year, 2 year, 5 years ago, you can usually are pretty impressed with yourself.
If you had to pick one word to describe who Shaun was, what would it be and why would you choose it?
Mm. Was as in pre franchise ownership, or was
Just who he
or
was.
now?
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
um, I would say passionate. There
yeah.
you go.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
What's keeping you up at night?
What's keeping me up at night? Yeah, finding the next business to help save some money. I'm
Mhm.
always trying to reach out to new businesses to try to save them money, because, like I said, so many businesses are paying so much and losing money under the table from their operating costs, that I'm always trying to find new ways to reach out to these businesses and share our message at Scully Mitchell on how we can best help them.
Shaun, it's been great having you on Canada's Entrepreneur. Really good meeting you. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it, Philip.
Wow, that was great. Shaun, he's that's such positive energy, and one heck of an interesting and very active entrepreneurial journey so far. And it's really good to see that he's found such a terrific business ownership opportunity with Scully Mitchell. Great to see you once again. I'm Phil Bliss. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter on our website and subscribe on our YouTube channel as well, or on any of the other major podcast channels. Thanks for listening to Canada's Entrepreneur, where you meet the entrepreneurs that drive Canada's economy. See you soon.